You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. What if I told you that the reason people don't value you isn't because you give too little, but because you give too much of the wrong thing? What if the moment you stop chasing approval, explaining yourself, or proving your worth, people suddenly feel uneasy at the thought of losing you? You've seen it happen. The moment you pull back, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in calm self-control, something shifts. Attention sharpens, respect rises, and suddenly your absence feels heavier than your presence ever did. This isn't manipulation. It's not games. It's not pretending to be cold. It's a Stoic principle so subtle that most people miss it entirely, yet so powerful that it rewires how others perceive your value. When you master this, people don't fear losing you because you threaten them. They fear losing you because you no longer need them. In this video, you'll learn the Stoic trick that silently changes the balance of power in any relationship, without force, without drama, without saying a word. Watch until the very end, because the final insight is what turns this from a concept into a personal advantage you can apply immediately. Miss it, and you miss the point. Number 1, you stop chasing outcomes and let attachment fall away. When you stop chasing outcomes and let attachment fall away, something profound happens inside you, and others feel it before they can explain it. This is the Stoic trick most people never see coming. Not because it's hidden, but because it looks so quiet, so ordinary that it gets overlooked. You stop leaning forward. You stop gripping the future with anxious hands. You stop needing a particular result to feel steady. And paradoxically, that's when your presence becomes harder to replace. As Epictetus put it with brutal clarity, if you want to be invincible, make yourself independent of what is not your own. Independence from outcomes is invincibility in disguise. Most people don't realize how loudly attachment speaks. It shows up in urgency, in subtle pressure, in the need for reassurance, in the invisible tension of "I hope this works out." You may think no one notices, but they do. Humans are remarkably sensitive to emotional weight. When you attach yourself to outcomes, you place that weight on others, on situations, on timing, and weight creates resistance. The Stoic path invites you to do the opposite, to place your weight back onto yourself. To care deeply about your conduct, your values, your choices, while releasing your grip on how things unfold. This doesn't mean you stop caring. Stoicism was never about apathy, it's about precision. You care about what is yours to govern, and you release what never truly belonged to you. Reminded himself, you always own the option of having no opinion. Extend that idea further. You always own the option of not clinging, of not begging the future to behave, of not tying your self-worth to a particular ending. When you internalize this, your energy changes. It slows, it deepens, it steadies. Attachment is sneaky because it disguises itself as effort. You tell yourself you're just being invested, just being committed, just being proactive. But underneath, there's often fear. Fear of loss, fear of uncertainty, fear of not being enough unless the outcome validates you. The Stoic response is not to argue with fear, but to see through it. To realize that no external result can grant you the stability you're refusing to give yourself. Once you see that, chasing begins to feel unnecessary, even exhausting. Letting attachment fall away doesn't happen through force. It happens through repeated recognition. Each time you notice yourself mentally rehearsing outcomes, gently pull your attention back to the present moment, to your posture, your breath, your intention. Ask yourself a simple Stoic question. What is mine to do right now? Not tomorrow, not later, now. This question cuts through illusion. It anchors you in agency, and agency dissolves desperation. There's a reason people feel uneasy around those who are overly attached. Attachment broadcasts dependence. Detachment, when rooted in self-command, broadcasts abundance. When you stop chasing outcomes, you stop signaling need. You stop rushing time. You stop bargaining with reality. And without trying to manipulate anything, you become someone whose absence would be felt, not because you demanded importance, but because you never begged for it. Seneca wrote, "He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." Apply this not just to hardship, but to disappointment. When you loosen your attachment to outcomes, you preemptively disarm disappointment. You stop fearing it. And when you no longer fear loss, others sense that you are not easily controlled by the possibility of it. This is where the quiet shift happens. You're no longer someone trying to secure a result. You're someone choosing how to show up regardless of the result. A powerful exercise here is outcome fasting. For a set period, one day, then a week, practice doing your best without mentally checking the scoreboard. No replaying, no projecting, no emotional forecasting. Each time your mind drifts toward "how will this turn out?" bring it back to "how am I acting right now?" This trains you to separate effort from expectation. Over time, you'll notice a surprising relief, as if a background noise you didn't realize was there has gone silent. Another practice is voluntary uncertainty. Instead of rushing to resolve ambiguity, sit with it. Let unanswered questions remain unanswered. Let space exist. This is uncomfortable at first because the mind craves closure, but this discomfort is training. You're teaching yourself that uncertainty is survivable, even workable. When you no longer scramble to close every loop, you radiate composure, and composure is magnetic. There's also a deeper layer to this Stoic trick. When you stop chasing outcomes, you reclaim time. Mental time, emotional time. You're no longer living ahead of yourself. You're here, fully. And presence, real presence, is rare. People are drawn to it instinctively. They sense when someone is not trying to extract something from the moment. When you're not attached to a specific result, your interactions feel lighter, cleaner, less transactional. That's when others begin to lean in, not because you're chasing, but because you're not. This doesn't mean you withdraw or become passive. You still act, you still choose, you still pursue what aligns with your values. The difference is internal. You act without clutching. You pursue without pleading. You move forward without dragging your self-worth behind you like a fragile package. This is Stoic strength. Quiet, unobtrusive, unshakable. End each day with a brief Stoic review. Ask yourself where you attached today, where you tried to control what wasn't yours, where you tied your mood to an outcome instead of your conduct. Then, without guilt, release it. Imagine placing that attachment down. You don't need to carry it into tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough of its own work. As this habit deepens, something counterintuitive happens. The less you chase outcomes, the more grounded you feel. The more grounded you feel, the less replaceable your presence becomes. Not because you're withholding, not because you're strategizing, but because you've become self-contained. And self-contained people are rare. So practice letting go daily, deliberately, quietly. Trust that what is meant to stay will not require desperation, and what requires desperation was never yours to hold. Stand firm in your effort. Detach from the ending, and watch how, without force or fear, your calm independence changes the way others experience you. Number 2, you remain emotionally composed when others expect reaction. When you remain emotionally composed at the exact moment others expect a reaction, something quiet but powerful shifts in the dynamic. You can feel it even if nothing is said. The air changes. The other person pauses. Their certainty weakens. Not because you dominated the situation, but because you didn't give them what they assumed they could extract from you. This is one of the most underrated Stoic skills, and it has very little to do with manipulation and everything to do with self-command. As Epictetus put it, it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. When you refuse to immediately perform those judgments out loud, through anger, defensiveness, or urgency, you reclaim control over the moment. Most people are trained without realizing it to react on cue. A stimulus appears and the response is almost automatic. Tension demands explanation. Discomfort demands reassurance. Provocation demands a counterstrike. When you break that pattern, you step out of predictability. You stop being emotionally accessible in the way most people are. And unpredictability, when paired with calm, creates psychological weight. People don't fear loud reactions. They fear silence that is chosen. Stoicism never asked you to suppress emotion. It asked you to contain it, to hold it long enough for reason to step in. Reminded himself daily, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. That sentence alone is a training manual. When others expect you to react, they are unconsciously testing whether they can move you. When you don't give them that movement, they sense that their influence has limits. And people instinctively respect, sometimes even fear, limits they cannot cross. Emotional composure signals abundance. It tells the world you are not desperate for resolution, approval, or control. You are not scrambling to correct perceptions. You are not rushing to reassert your value. This is why composure often makes people fear losing you. Not because you threaten to leave, but because you don't cling. You don't beg moments to go your way. You allow things to reveal themselves. That detachment is not coldness. It's self-trust. Reactions are currency. When you spend them too freely, their value drops. When you spend them selectively, people pay attention. The Stoics understood that reacting emotionally hands power outward. Remaining composed keeps power inward. Seneca warned, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Delay is not weakness. Delay is strategy. Delay allows you to choose the version of yourself that enters the moment. And that version, when calm, is rarely challenged twice. Here's the part that matters most. Composure is not passive. It is active restraint. It is strength under control. You are not frozen. You are watching. You are deciding. You are letting the other person reveal more than they intended while you reveal less than expected. This imbalance creates leverage without effort. Silence becomes space. Calm becomes contrast. And contrast makes your presence memorable. To build this habit, you must train your nervous system, not just your thoughts. Start with the pause practice. The moment you feel the urge to react, tightness, heat, urgency, commit to doing nothing for 3 full breaths, not preparing a response, not rehearsing a comeback, just breathing. This interrupts the automatic loop. Over time, your body learns that urgency does not equal danger. That lesson alone will change how you carry yourself. Next, adopt the internal script the Stoics used. This is an impression, not a command. Say it silently, again and again. Every emotional surge is an impression asking for your agreement. You are allowed to decline. When you stop granting automatic agreement, you stop being emotionally predictable. And predictability is what makes people feel safe enough to push. Another exercise is reaction fasting. Choose a set period, an hour, an afternoon, where you respond to nothing emotionally unless absolutely necessary. No internal commentary, no expressive reaction, just observation. This sharpens awareness. You begin to see how often reactions are unnecessary noise. When you later choose to react, it carries weight because it's rare. End each day with a Stoic review. Ask yourself where composure held and where it cracked, not with shame, with precision. The Stoics believed progress came from honest self-audit. Where you lost composure is not failure, it's data. Where you maintained it is proof of growth. Track patterns, not perfection. As this habit strengthens, something unexpected happens. You stop needing emotional outcomes to feel stable. You become less invested in forcing understanding, agreement, or validation. That independence is palpable. People feel it before they understand it. And when they sense that you are not emotionally tethered to their reactions, they begin to tread more carefully. Not because you intimidate them, but because they cannot control you. This is the Stoic trick. You don't threaten absence. You embody self-possession. You don't demand respect. You remove access to emotional leverage. And in that removal, others begin to sense what they could lose, not your attention, but your availability on their terms. Practice this quietly, train it daily. Let composure become your default, not your performance. Over time, you won't need to remind yourself to stay calm. Calm will arrive first. And when it does, you'll notice something subtle but undeniable. People start choosing their words more carefully around you. They hesitate before provoking. They feel the weight of your presence. Not because you reacted, but because you didn't. Number 3, you set boundaries once and never explain them twice. You set boundaries once and you never explain them twice because explanation, when repeated, quietly turns into negotiation. And negotiation is where respect starts to erode. The Stoics understood this with unsettling clarity. Boundaries were not speeches. They were decisions, clean, final, lived, not argued. As Epictetus said, if you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. What he meant was this: the moment you stop defending your limits, you stop handing your power to other people's opinions. Most people lose leverage not because their boundaries are unreasonable, but because they keep justifying them. They explain their standards, soften their tone, add context, offer reassurance, and then do it again when pressure returns. Each explanation sends an unspoken signal. This boundary is flexible if you push hard enough. Stoicism teaches you the opposite. A boundary stated once, calmly and without emotional charge, is enough. Anything more is noise. And silence, when it's intentional, is far more intimidating than words. When you stop explaining yourself, something fascinating happens. People feel the weight of finality, not hostility, not aggression, certainty. Wrote, let your actions be guided by reason, not disturbed by the opinions of others. A boundary backed by reason doesn't need defense. It stands on its own. You don't argue with gravity. You don't negotiate with the tide. You adapt. Others do the same when they sense that your standards are immovable. Fear of losing you doesn't come from drama or manipulation. It comes from scarcity of access. When people realize they don't get unlimited chances, unlimited explanations, or unlimited tolerance, they recalibrate. Your value rises not because you threaten to leave, but because you've made it clear, through behavior, that you are willing to walk away from anything that costs you self-respect. And self-respect, once visible, is magnetic. Stoicism never encouraged cruelty or coldness. It encouraged clarity. You are not punishing anyone by holding a boundary. You are simply refusing to abandon yourself. Seneca warned, "He who is too busy to care for himself cannot care for others." Every time you over-explain a boundary, you're prioritizing comfort over integrity. And people feel that imbalance, even if they can't articulate it. Here, where the real shift begins. When you decide that your boundaries are statements, not debates, your nervous system relaxes. You stop rehearsing responses. You stop anticipating pushback. You stop trying to control how others react. You say what needs to be said once, and then you let reality handle the rest. This calm detachment is what makes people uneasy, in a good way. They sense that you are not emotionally entangled in their approval. The Stoic trick is not withdrawal, it's restraint. You don't chase compliance. You don't demand understanding. You allow others to choose how they respond. And that freedom is precisely what makes your presence valuable. People fear losing what they can't control. When your boundaries are firm and unembellished, you become uncontrollable in the healthiest sense. To train this, start with boundary compression. Take one boundary you already know you need and reduce it to its simplest form. No backstory, no justification, one sentence. Practice saying it internally until it feels neutral. The goal is not confidence, it's calm. When a boundary feels calm inside you, it lands with authority outside you. Next, practice silence after declaration. This is where most people fail. They rush to fill the gap. They add explanations to relieve tension. Resist that urge. Silence is not awkward, it's instructional. It teaches others that the statement was complete. Sit with that silence. Let it do its work. Another powerful exercise is internal permission. Each morning, remind yourself, I do not owe emotional labor in exchange for self-respect. This reframes boundaries from rejection to alignment. You are not pushing people away. You are filtering who gets access. That distinction changes everything. You'll notice resistance at first, not always externally, but internally. A voice will tell you that you're being harsh, unreasonable, difficult. The Stoics anticipated this discomfort. Growth always challenges the part of you that survived by appeasing, but discomfort is not danger. It's adjustment. Stay with it. Over time, something sharpens in you. Your words become fewer but heavier. Your presence becomes steadier. People listen more carefully because they know you don't repeat yourself. They sense that crossing a line doesn't lead to chaos, it leads to absence. And absence, when earned, is powerful. This is why people fear losing you, not because you threaten, not because you manipulate, but because you are clear, consistent, and unwilling to bargain with your values. You don't raise your voice. You don't plead your case. You simply live by your standards. And those who recognize your worth adjust. Those who don't remove themselves. So set the boundary once. Say it cleanly. Mean it fully. Then return to your life without commentary. Let your consistency teach what your words no longer need to. That is Stoic power, quiet, unapologetic, and unforgettable. Number 4, you walk away calmly the moment respect drops. You walk away calmly the moment respect drops, not because you are cold, dramatic, or easily offended, but because you understand something most people never fully grasp. Self-respect is not negotiable. It is the foundation everything else stands on. The Stoics were uncompromising on this point. As Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, be willing to disappoint, to withdraw, to let go, rather than betray your own standards. The calm walk away is not a tactic. It is a declaration made without words. Most people stay too long when respect begins to erode. They explain, they justify, they negotiate their dignity inch by inch, hoping things will improve if they just try harder. Stoicism teaches the opposite. The moment respect drops, the lesson is already complete. Staying after that point trains others how to treat you. Leaving calmly trains them how to remember you. Silence becomes a boundary. Distance becomes a message. And the absence of reaction becomes unsettling to those who expected you to tolerate less than you deserve. Walking away calmly is powerful because it contains no bitterness, no slammed doors, no speeches, no need to be understood. Wrote, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. When respect drops, the enemy is not the other person. It is the temptation to abandon your values in order to maintain connection. The Stoic refuses that trade. You do not leave to punish. You leave to preserve alignment with yourself. What creates fear of losing you is not manipulation or scarcity games. It is consistency. When people realize that your presence depends on mutual respect, and that this rule is applied quietly, instantly, and without exception, they sense the weight of your standards. You are no longer someone who can be tested endlessly. You are someone whose absence becomes costly, not because you threaten to leave, but because you already have. This calm departure works because it removes leverage. There is nothing to argue against, no emotional hook to grab, no opening to renegotiate terms. You are not angry, you are not pleading. You are simply unavailable for dynamics that require self-betrayal. That composure is what unsettles people. Seneca observed, "He who has learned how to die has unlearned how to be a slave." To walk away calmly is a small rehearsal of this principle. You demonstrate that you are not enslaved by approval, attachment, or fear of loss. Notice how this shifts your internal world. You stop scanning for signs of validation. You stop calculating how much disrespect you should tolerate to keep peace. You stop performing emotional labor for those who have already lowered the standard. Instead, you anchor yourself to something non-negotiable, your own worth. And when you operate from that place, people feel it immediately. They may not articulate it, but they sense that access to you is conditional, not on their status or charm, but on their behavior. The Stoic understands that respect is not restored through confrontation when it has already dropped below a certain line. Past that point, words lose power. Action becomes the only language left. Calm withdrawal communicates clarity. It says, "I know who I am and I know what I allow." That clarity creates a vacuum. And human psychology does not like vacuums. People fill them with reflection, regret, or renewed effort, not because you asked for it, but because your absence forces awareness. To embody this habit, you must train yourself internally before it ever shows externally. Begin with a respect inventory. Write down, privately, what behaviors signal respect to you and what behaviors signal erosion. Be precise. Vagueness leads to self-betrayal. The exercise is not about control, it's about clarity. When your standards are clear to you, your actions become effortless. Next, practice emotional non-attachment. This does not mean detachment from values, but detachment from outcomes. Repeat this Stoic reminder daily. I do not control how others act. I only control what I accept. Sit with that idea until it feels natural. The calmer you are with uncertainty, the easier it becomes to walk away without drama. Another exercise is silent rehearsal. Imagine moments where respect dips, not to relive them emotionally, but to rehearse composure. Visualize yourself choosing calm withdrawal rather than explanation. This conditions your nervous system. When the moment arrives, your body already knows what to do. The Stoics believed in mentally preparing for difficulty so it loses its shock. Also train your language by using less of it. Reduce over-explaining in everyday life. Speak when clarity is needed, not when anxiety demands reassurance. The less you rely on words to defend your worth, the more your presence carries it naturally. Silence, when chosen deliberately, is not weakness. It is control. Over time, this habit reshapes how people relate to you. They sense that you do not linger where you are undervalued, that you do not beg for fairness, that you do not cling when the ground shifts. This creates a quiet tension, not fear rooted in insecurity, but respect rooted in consequence. Losing access to you means losing stability, calm, and integrity, and that loss registers deeply. Most importantly, this habit reshapes how you relate to yourself. You stop seeing walking away as failure. You see it as fidelity to your character. You realize that staying where respect has dropped costs more than leaving ever will. And once you internalize that truth, you move differently. You stand taller. You speak less. You choose more carefully, and without trying to intimidate or impress, you become someone whose presence is valued and whose absence is felt. Practice this quietly. Apply it consistently. Do not announce it. Let it become instinct. Because the real Stoic trick is not making people fear losing you. It's reaching a point where you are completely at peace with leaving anything that requires you to abandon yourself. That peace is unmistakable, and it commands more power than any demand ever could. Number 5, you become comfortable with silence and pauses. Comfort with silence and pauses is one of the most underestimated Stoic advantages you can develop, and once you truly embody it, the entire dynamic of how people experience you begins to shift. Silence stops being awkward, pauses stop being empty. They become charged. They create space. And space, when handled with composure, makes people lean in instead of pulling away. This is not a trick of manipulation. It's a byproduct of inner stability. As Epictetus put it, nature has given us one tongue and two ears so that we may hear twice as much as we speak. When you no longer rush to fill every gap with words, you quietly communicate that you are not anxious for approval, not afraid of stillness, and not dependent on constant exchange to feel secure. Most people are deeply uncomfortable with silence. They treat pauses as threats. A gap in conversation feels like exposure, like something must be fixed immediately. So they rush to explain, to justify, to add more, to soften, to overdeliver. This urgency leaks neediness. When you remove that urgency, when you allow silence to exist without flinching, you invert the dynamic. You are no longer chasing connection. You are allowing it to come to you. And that shift is felt immediately, even if no one can explain why. Silence works because it signals self-trust. When you don't rush to speak, you show that your value is not dependent on being constantly heard. You trust your presence enough to let it stand on its own. Reminded himself, let silence be your general rule, say only what is necessary and in few words. This wasn't advice about withdrawal. It was guidance about precision. When you speak less but with intention, your words carry weight. When you pause before responding, your reactions feel chosen rather than automatic. People sense that you are not easily pulled off center. There is also a deeper psychological effect at play. Silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty forces attention. When you don't immediately react, explain, or reassure, the other person is left to fill the space with their own thoughts. They begin to wonder, they reflect, they project. And in that space, your perceived value rises, not because you are withholding, but because you are not overextending. The Stoics understood that power often lies not in action, but in restraint. Seneca captured this clearly when he said, "He who knows how to be silent is the master of himself." To become comfortable with silence, you must first stop treating it as a problem. Silence is not a failure of communication. It is a form of communication. It says, I am present, I am steady, I am not in a hurry. When you internalize this, pauses stop feeling heavy. They feel natural, grounded, intentional. You begin to realize that not everything needs a response, and not every moment needs to be filled. That realization alone separates you from the majority. Training this skill is subtle but powerful. Start with intentional pauses. When you feel the urge to respond immediately, don't suppress it, delay it. Take a breath. Let the moment settle. Notice how quickly the impulse to speak fades when you don't obey it instantly. This trains your nervous system to tolerate stillness. Over time, stillness becomes familiar rather than threatening. This is not about appearing mysterious. It's about becoming composed. Another exercise is silence exposure. Give yourself periods where you deliberately reduce verbal output, not to withdraw, but to listen more deeply to your thoughts, your body, the rhythm of interaction. You'll notice how much unnecessary speech is driven by discomfort rather than intention. By removing excess words, you begin to speak only when you actually mean something. This naturally increases the impact of what you say. There is also the practice of ending thoughts cleanly. Many people weaken their presence by trailing off, adding disclaimers, or softening their words out of fear of how they'll be received. Instead, practice finishing your sentences and allowing silence to follow. Let your words land. Don't chase validation afterward. This feels uncomfortable at first, but it builds a quiet authority that others instinctively respond to. As you grow more comfortable with pauses, you'll notice a shift inside you. You stop measuring moments by how well you performed verbally. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop feeling the need to manage impressions constantly. This inner quiet is contagious. People feel calmer around you, more attentive, more aware. And paradoxically, they begin to fear losing access to you, not because you threaten absence, but because your presence feels rare. This is where the Stoic trick truly lives. When you are at ease with silence, you no longer signal dependency. You signal abundance of self. You show that you don't need constant stimulation, reassurance, or engagement to feel whole. That independence creates gravity. People are drawn toward what feels self-contained and steady. They respect what doesn't beg to be noticed. Remember, this is not about playing games or withholding warmth. Stoicism never taught coldness. It taught control. Silence, when paired with calm presence, is not distance, it's depth. It gives interactions room to breathe. It allows meaning to surface naturally, and it protects your energy from being scattered. So practice this daily. Pause before responding. Let silence exist without rescuing it. Speak less but with more intention. Observe how your inner state changes first. That's where the real work happens. And then quietly notice how others respond differently. Not louder, not aggressively, but with attention, with care, with an unspoken awareness that your presence is not guaranteed and therefore not easily replaced. Number 6, you invest deeply in your own purpose, not approval. When you invest deeply in your own purpose instead of chasing approval, something powerful and almost unsettling happens in the social atmosphere around you. People begin to sense that you are not orbiting them. You are not adjusting yourself to be liked, chosen, validated, or kept. You are moving according to an internal compass, and that independence quietly flips the usual dynamic. As wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. The Stoic understands that approval is external, purpose is internal, and only one of those deserves to guide your life. Most people live approval-first lives without realizing it. They listen for reactions more than they listen to their own conscience. They adjust their tone, their pace, even their values based on how they think they're being received. Over time, this creates a subtle dependence. Not dramatic, not obvious, but real. When approval becomes fuel, you start leaking power. You hesitate, you over-explain, you second-guess. And even if people enjoy your presence, they don't fear losing it, because it feels available, adaptable, and eager to stay. Purpose changes that entirely. Purpose anchors you. It gives your days weight and direction independent of who is watching. When you wake up guided by something you respect, not something you hope will be praised, your energy shifts. You speak differently. You move differently. You don't rush to fill silence. You don't scramble to repair impressions. You don't abandon your rhythm just because someone else disapproves. And that's when people begin to feel something unfamiliar, uncertainty about their hold on you. This isn't manipulation, it's alignment. The Stoics were clear that a life guided by externals will always be fragile. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That line isn't about arrogance, it's about freedom. When you stop shaping yourself to avoid disapproval, you remove other people's leverage. You become harder to pull, harder to sway, harder to predict. And humans instinctively value what doesn't bend easily. Purpose also creates selectivity. When your life has a clear direction, not everything deserves your time, attention, or emotional investment. You stop scattering yourself. You stop explaining your priorities. You stop negotiating your standards. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. And clarity creates contrast. People begin to sense that access to you is not guaranteed by proximity or history or expectation. It's earned by alignment. That realization alone makes your presence feel more valuable. Approval-seeking broadcasts a subtle message. I need this to go well. Purpose-driven behavior broadcasts a different one. I'll act rightly regardless. The first invites testing. The second invites respect. Seneca warned, "He who depends on another for his happiness is a slave." When you depend on approval, you hand over your emotional stability. When you depend on purpose, you keep it. And people feel the difference immediately, even if they can't articulate it. Here's the paradox. When approval is no longer your focus, you often receive more of it, but it no longer controls you. Because you're not chasing it, it stops defining you. And because it stops defining you, others sense that losing you would mean losing someone who cannot be easily replaced. Not because you perform better, but because you are less available to be shaped. To build this Stoic trick into your life, you need daily reinforcement. Start with purpose articulation, not in grand, dramatic language, but in simple, uncompromising terms. Write down what you are committed to becoming, not what you want others to think of you. Focus on principles, not outcomes. Read it daily. This grounds your actions before the world has a chance to vote on them. Next, practice approval fasting. For short periods, deliberately refrain from checking for reactions, internal or imagined. Don't replay conversations. Don't audit expressions. Don't look for confirmation that you were received well. This isn't indifference, it's discipline. The exercise trains your nervous system to find safety internally rather than socially. Over time, you'll notice how much lighter you feel when your self-worth isn't constantly being renegotiated. Another powerful practice is value-first decision-making. Before responding, agreeing, or engaging, ask yourself one quiet question. Is this aligned with my direction? Not will this be liked? Not will this keep peace? Alignment over appeasement. Each time you choose alignment, you strengthen trust in yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of composure. There's also the Stoic practice of negative visualization, not to create fear, but to remove dependence. Briefly imagine losing approval entirely, not dramatically, just neutrally. Then notice what remains. Your character remains. Your direction remains. Your effort remains. This exercise weakens the emotional grip of approval by reminding you that it is optional, not essential. As purpose becomes central, something else happens. You stop clinging. And when you stop clinging, others feel the space. Not distance, but autonomy. You're present without being attached, engaged without being dependent, warm without being needy. That combination is rare, and rarity creates perceived value. People fear losing you not because you threaten absence, but because your presence is no longer guaranteed by their validation. You could stay, you could go, and either way, you remain intact. That's what unsettles and attracts at the same time. This path requires courage. There will be moments where approval would be easier, quicker, softer. But the Stoic understands that ease is not always strength. Strength is coherence, living in alignment with your purpose even when it costs you temporary comfort. Over time, that consistency builds a reputation you don't have to manage. So invest deeply in your principles, in your direction, in the work of becoming someone you respect even when no one is watching. Let approval be a byproduct, not a pursuit. Because the moment people realize you are not anchored to their opinion, they begin to sense something real at stake. And that's when they stop wondering how to keep you impressed and start wondering how not to lose you. Number 7, you respond slowly, never from urgency. Responding slowly, never from urgency, is one of the quietest forms of power you can develop. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't posture. It doesn't threaten. Yet it changes how people experience you at a fundamental level. When you don't rush to reply, don't scramble to reassure, don't react the moment a feeling spikes, you communicate something without words. You are not desperate for outcomes. And nothing makes people more aware of your value than realizing you are not grasping for theirs. Urgency is invisible panic. It leaks through tone, timing, and energy. Even when your words are calm, urgency betrays itself in speed. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus reminded us, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, resist the reflex to immediately clarify, explain, or secure your position. When you respond slowly, you allow space to form, and space is where respect grows. When you pause before responding, you reclaim authorship over your inner world. You stop allowing external stimuli to dictate your internal rhythm. Most people live in reaction mode, bouncing from impulse to impulse, mistaking speed for sincerity. You choose a different path. You let the moment breathe. You let emotions settle. You let your response come from clarity instead of pressure. That choice alone reshapes how others perceive you. Calm timing feels intentional. Intentionality feels rare. And rarity creates value. Stoicism never taught indifference, it taught sovereignty. You care, but you don't collapse. You feel, but you don't flinch. You respond, but you don't rush. Wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years." This wasn't a call to hurry. It was a call to presence. Slowness in response is presence refined. It signals that you are here, grounded, and choosing your words because they matter, not because you're afraid of silence. Silence, when chosen, becomes a mirror. Others begin to project into it. They fill the gap with assumptions. They wonder what you're thinking. They sense that you're not easily swayed. This isn't manipulation, it's self-regulation. When you don't rush to respond, you show that your emotional state isn't hostage to the moment. And emotional independence is magnetic. People don't fear losing someone who is frantic to be kept. They fear losing someone who is composed without them. Urgency usually disguises itself as politeness, enthusiasm, or care. But beneath it often lies a need. The need to be understood immediately, validated quickly, secured instantly. The Stoic sees through this. Seneca warned, "Hurry is the mark of a slave." Not a slave to others, but a slave to inner agitation. When you slow your responses, you free yourself from that agitation. You stop negotiating your worth in real time. This doesn't mean becoming cold or withdrawn. It means becoming deliberate. You allow yourself time to choose the right tone, the right words, or even no words at all. You understand that not every moment requires an answer and not every feeling requires expression. This restraint communicates depth. People sense that your attention is not cheap, that your engagement is earned, not automatic. There is a rhythm to grounded communication. Fast responses come from nervous energy. Slow responses come from self-trust. When you trust yourself, you don't rush to secure outcomes. You know that what's aligned will remain and what isn't doesn't need chasing. This mindset quietly shifts the balance of power, not outwardly, internally. And internal shifts are the ones others feel most strongly. To train this habit, begin with intentional delay, not avoidance. Delay. When you feel the pull to respond immediately, pause for a set number of breaths. Let your body settle before your mind speaks. This teaches your nervous system that silence is safe, that nothing collapses if you don't react instantly. Over time, this becomes natural. Your response is slow not because you're trying, but because you're centered. Another exercise is response review. At the end of the day, reflect on moments where urgency tried to take over, not to criticize yourself, but to observe. Where did speed feel necessary? Where did it feel compulsive? Awareness alone begins the shift. The Stoics believed reflection was a form of sharpening the mind. You don't fix what you don't first see. You can also practice value-based responding. Before replying, ask yourself quietly, am I responding to align with my values or to relieve discomfort? This question cuts through noise. Value-based responses feel steady and clean. Discomfort-based responses feel rushed and heavy. Choose the former, even if it means waiting longer than feels comfortable. As you practice this, something changes in you before it changes in others. You feel less reactive, less pulled, less dependent on immediate outcomes. You begin to experience time differently, slower, fuller, more intentional, and people pick up on this. They sense that you are not operating from fear of loss, that you are not scrambling to hold on, that your presence is chosen, not clung to. This is the Stoic trick that isn't a trick at all. It's discipline, it's patience, it's self-trust. When you respond slowly, never from urgency, you signal abundance without saying it. You communicate that your inner world is stable, and stability is what people don't want to lose. So start now. Let silence work for you. Let time become your ally. Respond when you're ready, not when you're anxious. Over days and weeks, this habit reshapes your energy. You stop chasing connection. You stop fearing distance. And paradoxically, people lean in, not because you demanded attention, but because your calm made it worth holding on to. Number 8, you accept loss as neutral, not threatening. You accept loss as neutral, not threatening, and that single shift quietly rewires the way people experience you. Most people live as if loss is a verdict, something shameful, painful, or destabilizing. They cling, negotiate, and grasp because they believe that losing something means becoming less. Stoicism cuts straight through that illusion. Loss is not a moral failure. It is not an identity wound. It is an event, nothing more, nothing less. When you internalize this, your posture changes. Your voice changes. Your energy changes. And people feel it immediately, even if they don't understand why. The Stoics were relentless about this distinction. What is within your control is your judgment. What is outside it is everything else. Epictetus put it plainly. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Loss only terrifies when you label it as catastrophic. The moment you strip it of that label, it loses its leverage over you. And when something loses leverage over you, it also loses the ability to control your behavior. Most people signal fear without speaking. They signal it through urgency, through tension, through the need to secure outcomes before they slip away. You don't need to announce that you're unafraid of loss. Your calm does that for you. When you accept loss as neutral, you stop bargaining with reality. You stop trying to lock people, situations, or outcomes into permanence. You let things be free. And paradoxically, that freedom is exactly what makes others hesitate to walk away. Stoicism teaches that attachment is not love and fear is not loyalty. When fear of loss governs you, you become predictable. Predictability erodes leverage. The Stoic understands something deeper. The less you fear losing something, the less power it has over your decisions. Seneca warned that he who fears death will never do anything worth of a man who is alive. Replace death with loss and the principle holds. Fear shrinks you. Acceptance expands you. Accepting loss does not mean inviting it. It means you no longer distort yourself to avoid it. You don't rush to preserve what isn't yours to control. You don't dilute your values to keep what is already temporary. You don't trade dignity for reassurance. When people sense that you are willing to let go without collapsing, they experience something unfamiliar, absence of pressure. And pressure, when removed, reveals desire. People fear losing what doesn't need them. This mindset recenters your identity. You stop defining yourself by what stays and start defining yourself by how you stand. Reminded himself, receive without pride, let go without attachment. That sentence is not poetic decoration, it's a discipline. When you can receive without clinging and release without resentment, you become emotionally unmovable, not cold, not distant, grounded. There's a psychological clarity that emerges when loss is neutral. You no longer scramble to control narratives. You don't rush to explain yourself. You don't chase closure. You trust that your character does not evaporate when something exits your life. This quiet trust creates an unspoken boundary. People sense that you are choosing them, not needing them. And choice is magnetic. Need is heavy. To train this, you begin with mental rehearsal. The Stoics practiced not to dwell in pessimism, but to dissolve fear through familiarity. The exercise is simple. Imagine loss calmly, not dramatically, not emotionally, just neutrally. Visualize the absence without catastrophe. Let your mind see that you still stand, that your breath continues, that your values remain intact. This rehearsal removes shock. When shock disappears, fear weakens. Another exercise is value anchoring. Ask yourself repeatedly and honestly, what about me remains even if this is gone? Write it down, read it, sit with it. You'll realize that what matters most, your judgment, discipline, integrity, was never at risk. This realization builds inner stability. Stability is what others feel as strength. Practice deliberate non-attachment in small ways. Notice where you seek certainty, reassurance, or guarantees. Instead of tightening your grip, soften it. Not outwardly, internally. Release the demand that outcomes must unfold a certain way for you to remain whole. This is not passivity. This is sovereignty. You act fully, but you don't hinge your worth on the result. As this habit deepens, something counterintuitive happens. You become more selective, not less. When loss doesn't scare you, you no longer tolerate misalignment just to avoid emptiness. You walk away from what erodes you without inner drama. That calm exit, unannounced, unthreatened, unbitter, is what lingers in people's minds. Silence, when backed by self-respect, is louder than any argument. Understand this clearly. People don't fear losing someone who begs to stay. They fear losing someone who could leave and still be at peace. That peace communicates abundance. It signals that your life is not dependent on any single attachment. And abundance, when authentic, reshapes the balance of power without confrontation. This is not a tactic, it's a posture, a way of standing in the world. You don't adopt it to manipulate outcomes, you adopt it to free yourself. And freedom has side effects. One of them is that people become more careful with you, more attentive, more aware that your presence is a choice, not a guarantee. So train your mind daily to see loss as an event, not a verdict. Release the reflex to panic at the idea of absence. Anchor yourself in what cannot be taken, and let this quiet acceptance reshape how you move, speak, and decide. When you do, you won't need to convince anyone of your value. The calm certainty with which you can let go will make it unmistakable. Number 9. You stay consistent regardless of how others behave. You stay consistent regardless of how others behave, and that single habit quietly rearranges the power dynamic around you. Not because you manipulate, withdraw, or perform detachment as a tactic, but because you refuse to let your inner state be negotiated by external moods. This is one of the most underestimated Stoic strengths. Consistency is not rigidity, it is steadiness, and steadiness unsettles people who are used to emotional leverage. As Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. What he was pointing to is deeper than appearances. When you stop adjusting yourself to win approval or avoid discomfort, you become hard to move. And what cannot be easily moved is always respected, and often feared to lose. Most people unconsciously train others how to treat them by changing their tone, energy, availability, and values in response to external behavior. Praise makes them warmer. Indifference makes them anxious. Disapproval makes them bend. Over time, this creates a pattern. Their consistency depends on how they're treated. The Stoic does the opposite. You decide who you are before anyone else enters the equation. Your values don't fluctuate. Your self-respect doesn't spike or crash. Your presence doesn't inflate or withdraw based on reactions. This predictability of character, ironically, makes you unpredictable emotionally. Others cannot pull your strings because you've stopped handing them the controls. Consistency builds a quiet kind of gravity. When you don't reward bad behavior with emotional reactions or punish good behavior with overinvestment, people begin to sense that your inner balance doesn't orbit them. It stands on its own. Reminded himself, the tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do. This isn't apathy, it's alignment. You care deeply about your principles, not about maintaining emotional symmetry with others. And that difference is felt immediately. What makes people fear losing you is not distance, it's reliability of self. When your behavior doesn't swing wildly, others can't predict how to control you. They can't trigger closeness through approval or distance through neglect. You don't become colder when tested, nor do you become warmer when validated. You remain the same person, calm, present. That steadiness forces others to confront something uncomfortable. If they want you in their life, they must meet you where you stand, not where they wish to pull you. Stoicism teaches that your role is to govern what is yours and release what is not. Your thoughts, choices, and actions belong to you. Other people's moods do not. Seneca put it plainly, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Much of inconsistency comes from imagined consequences. Fear of being disliked, fear of being abandoned, fear of being misunderstood. When you stop letting these fears dictate your behavior, your consistency becomes an anchor. And anchors are not dramatic, but they are impossible to ignore. Here, where this becomes practical, start by defining your non-negotiables, not rules for others, standards for yourself. Decide how you speak, how you respond, how you treat your time and energy. Once defined, practice acting from these standards even when it feels uncomfortable, especially then. Consistency is forged under pressure, not ease. The exercise is simple but demanding. Before responding, ask yourself, is this aligned with who I chose to be, or am I reacting to how I'm being treated? Answer honestly, then act accordingly. Another practice is emotional lag. When something external shifts tone, attention, behavior, do nothing internally for a moment. Let the impulse to adjust pass. This pause trains you to stay rooted. Over time, your nervous system learns that stability is safe. You don't need to chase equilibrium through others. You carry it with you. You should also rehearse internal dialogue. When you feel the urge to change yourself to preserve connection, remind yourself, consistency is not abandonment, it is integrity. You are not withdrawing, you are remaining. This distinction matters. You are present without being pliable, available without being dependent, engaged without being reactive. That balance is rare, and rarity always creates value. People fear losing what they cannot replace, and what cannot be replaced is not perfection, intensity, or constant availability. It's groundedness. When your behavior is steady, others begin to notice their own fluctuations more clearly. Your calm highlights their chaos. Your certainty exposes their indecision. This contrast creates tension, not in you but in them. They sense that you are not easily destabilized. And anything that stands firm in a shifting environment becomes something people don't want to lose. There's also a deeper psychological effect at play. When you remain consistent, you remove the reward-punishment loop that most relationships unconsciously operate on. You don't reinforce behavior with emotional volatility. This forces others to relate to you as an equal, not as a regulator of your mood. Equality is confronting. It demands responsibility, and responsibility is often avoided unless the person is worth it. Your consistency silently asks that question without words. End each day with a short reflection. Where did you stay aligned? Where did you bend? Not to criticize, but to refine. Stoics treated reflection as calibration. Each adjustment brings you closer to coherence, and coherence is what people feel when they say someone has presence. Understand this clearly. Staying consistent does not make you cold. It makes you trustworthy to yourself first. And self-trust radiates outward. When people sense that you won't disappear emotionally, won't overreact, won't reshape yourself to fit the moment, they begin to recognize your value. Not because you threatened absence, but because your presence has weight. So practice this quietly. Stay steady when others shift. Stay aligned when emotions rise. Stay rooted when expectations press. Over time, you'll notice something undeniable. People lean in differently. They speak more carefully. They hesitate before taking you for granted, not because you demanded importance, but because your consistency made your absence unthinkable. Number 10, you value self-respect more than being chosen. You value self-respect more than being chosen, and that single decision quietly rearranges every power dynamic in your life. The Stoics understood this long before modern language tried to dress it up as confidence or detachment. This is not arrogance, it's alignment. When you refuse to trade your dignity for approval, people feel it immediately, even if they can't explain why. Put it simply, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Self-respect begins there. With an internal line you will not cross, even when crossing it would make you liked, selected, or temporarily validated. Most people are taught subtly, repeatedly, to crave being chosen, chosen by others, chosen by circumstances, chosen by opportunity. Over time, that craving turns into quiet self-abandonment. You feel it when you overextend, tolerate what unsettles you, or silence your own standards just to remain desirable. Stoicism cuts through that fog. It reminds you that being chosen means nothing if you had to betray yourself to earn it. And when you internalize that truth, your behavior shifts. You stop negotiating your values. You stop auditioning. You stop shrinking your needs to fit someone else's comfort. That shift alone changes how people relate to you. The paradox is this: the less you need to be chosen, the more valuable your presence becomes. Not because you play games, but because you are no longer available at any cost. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, stop bending yourself to appear acceptable. When you choose self-respect over approval, you accept the risk of not being liked. That risk is the price of freedom, and freedom is magnetic. Fear of losing you doesn't come from manipulation. It comes from clarity. People sense when your presence is optional to you, when staying aligned matters more than staying included. You don't threaten withdrawal. You don't announce boundaries. You simply live by them. That creates contrast. Most people are emotionally available on credit, constantly in hopes of security. When you don't do that, your attention carries weight. Your agreement feels earned. Your absence feels noticeable. Stoicism teaches that attachment to outcomes weakens you. Attachment to character strengthens you. Seneca wrote, "The man who is contented with what he has is richer than the man who wants more." Applied here, it means this: when you are content with your own standards, you stop chasing external selection. You become internally selected, and that inner sufficiency subtly unsettles those who are used to being the judge rather than the evaluated. This doesn't mean indifference, it means discernment. You still care, but you care without desperation. You engage without clinging. You listen without losing yourself. That balance is rare, and rarity creates value. People fear losing what they can't easily replace, and self-respect is not replaceable. Anyone can be agreeable, few can be grounded. To build this habit, start with a daily self-alignment check. Ask yourself one quiet question before responding, agreeing, or committing. Will this cost me respect for myself? Not comfort, not convenience, respect. If the answer feels heavy or constricting, pause. That pause is your protection. You don't need to justify it. Silence is often the most self-respecting response. Next, practice value-first decisions. Choose one value: honesty, composure, fairness, restraint, and let it guide your actions for the day. Not loudly, not internally. Let that value be your compass. When decisions arise, measure them against it. Over time, this trains your nervous system to prioritize integrity over acceptance. You begin to trust yourself more, and when you trust yourself, others sense it. Another exercise is controlled non-chasing. Notice when the impulse to pursue validation arises. Don't shame it, observe it, then consciously choose not to act on it. Let the urge pass. This teaches you that you are not dependent on immediate reassurance. Each time you resist the chase, you reinforce inner stability. Stability reads as strength. At the end of the day, review moments where you honored yourself and moments where you compromised. Not to criticize, but to recalibrate. Stoics believed reflection was mental hygiene. You're not aiming for flawlessness. You're aiming for consistency. And consistency is what builds identity. As you deepen this practice, something changes in your posture toward life. You stop trying to be indispensable. You become irreplaceable by being authentic. You stop asking, "Will they choose me?" and start asking, "Do I choose this?" That reversal is everything. It removes pressure. It restores calm. It makes your presence deliberate instead of needy. People fear losing you when they realize you won't lose yourself to keep them. Not because you threaten departure, but because you are whole without attachment. That wholeness creates contrast in a world full of quiet bargaining. And once felt, it's not easily forgotten. So choose self-respect daily, in small moments, in quiet decisions, in pauses no one sees. Let your standards be steady. Let your boundaries be lived, not announced. And trust the Stoic truth that has survived centuries. When you stand firmly in who you are, without chasing, without pleading, without shrinking, you don't need to make people fear losing you. Your self-respect does that for you. If there's one thing to remember, it's this: the Stoic never tries to be missed. He becomes impossible to replace. When you stop chasing approval, stop over-explaining, stop bending your boundaries just to be liked, something powerful happens. Your presence gains weight. Your absence gains meaning. People begin to sense that losing you would cost them something real. This isn't manipulation. It's mastery. Mastery of your emotions, your standards, your time. And when you live this way, you don't need to demand respect or attention. It comes to you naturally. So take this with you today. Practice restraint. Choose self-respect over reassurance. Let your silence, your discipline, and your consistency speak louder than words ever could. If this message resonated with you, don't stop here. Rewatch this video, apply just one principle today, and watch how the dynamic around you starts to shift. And if you want more Stoic wisdom like this, insights that make you stronger, calmer, and undeniably valuable, make sure you stay with this channel.